This next young lady is somebody I have a lot in common with. She is from the border of Virginia and North Carolina. She's just north of Mayberry, North Carolina, with the Andy Griffith Show. She's right there at close to Mount Pilot and the whole thing. And then I'm from the coast of North Carolina originally. She thinks that's not really North Carolina, but it is. It is. We love sharing our Southern culture, and now we love sharing our Western culture. We're both very passionate about this area, about the pioneers that built this place, as well as the native tribes that lived here. It's a passion of both of us, and she teaches me every day. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Miss Deb Goodrich.
This stool is rocking, I'm telling you. As I said before, I am the chair of the 200th anniversary of the Santa Fe Trail, and it's been wonderful to be able to combine those passions for the Fort Wallace story and for the Santa Fe Trail story and how they interconnect. That's been pretty awesome. In your packet today, you have 2 copies of Wagon Tracks. This first one has the story of William Becknell's trek to Santa Fe, and the second one has basically the story of Sheridan and how that was part of the trail. So thank you to the Santa Fe Trail Association. Ruth Friesen does a phenomenal job with this, and if you don't want to miss another copy of this tremendous magazine, we would encourage you to join the association, especially while we've got so many cool things going on now. And I have lost, okay, here we go. All right, so our official commemoration is, and we're not using the word celebration because celebration is not appropriate in every circumstance. One of the examples would be the Kaw Nation, and we had Pauline Sharp here, was it a year ago now? Who performed as her grandmother, Lucy Eads, who was the first female leader of the Kaw Nation. And the Kaw were located, their reservation was next to the Santa Fe Trail at Council Grove. Had it not been for that traffic on the trail, the Kaw might have been able to remain there for another decade or two, or maybe not even have been removed from the state that was named for them. And that is an ongoing story. The Kaw have through purchase or gift, gotten back much of the land that was theirs around Council Grove, and they continue to come back to Council Grove every year, and so there's an ongoing relationship there, and hopefully more of the land will be back in their hands eventually. So these stories, just like Mark Simmons said, Chris quoted Mark Simmons, the Santa Fe Trail lives on. It definitely does. And, people are still using those routes. Truckers and traders are still going up and down the Santa Fe Trail. Our honorary chair of the Santa Fe Trail 200 is our dear friend, Michael Martin Murphy. If you can't take advantage of your friends and relatives, who can you take advantage of? So if you would go ahead and start filming, sir. So Murph really wanted to be with us today, and you all know that he has been so generous to the museum and to our community, and we appreciate him so much, and he really wanted to be with us today, but he's in Fort Worth. He has a big birthday party tomorrow, and he didn't think he would be forgiven if he missed that, so we miss him today. But his representative, my brother Frank Goodrich, is here with us, and Frank is head of Murph's Murphy Western Institute, which is not to honor Murph, but to honor his pioneering ancestors in preserving and telling the story of the American West. So because Murph has been so good to us, and because we're missing him today, we are going to all sing happy birthday to him, and then we're going to share that on Facebook with him. So Jane, would you lead us in singing Happy Birthday?
Yes, I can, but let's get a good film of it.
Fox is filming it.
Fox is filming it?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, this is for Murph. Ready? Happy
Birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Murph. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday. We love you and we miss you. We hope you have a wonderful birthday tomorrow, and we can't wait till you can come back and join us. So, thank you, Murph. Mwah. Thank you, Fox. It takes a village, people. So, Murph, one of the things we were visiting on the phone on Sunday, and then Frank and I were just talking about it. Murph is thinking that he is going to travel the trail for the anniversary of Becknell's trip, which was basically September through November of 1821. Murph is thinking he's going to retrace those steps on the dates, or pretty close to them, and take Frank and a couple other buddies and do some performances along the way. So if you would, I think this is where, visit SantaFeTrail.org. And it's a fantastic website. It's absolutely fantastic. And that will give you the events, no matter where what community it is, history of the trail, some terrific maps, and membership information. Most importantly, membership information. So I would strongly encourage you to join and to be part of making history for the 200th. All right, the Santa Fe Trail slashes through Kansas. We have more miles of the trail than any other state. But my mission, just like my mission with Fort Wallace, is to show people, no matter where they are, that they have a connection to the trail. And who would think, when we first started talking about what would Fort Wallace do this year and what our connection to the trail would be, I have to admit that a lot of us were not really up on what that connection would be, and would that be a tenuous connection to draw to the Santa Fe Trail? But I assure you it is not. It is a really profound connection. And later on this month, actually Wednesday, I'm headed to Boston. And I'm going to be in Boston and Philadelphia the last part of this month. And part of it will be for research. Part of it is going to be meeting with the media there and getting some of these folks interested in reporting on the 200th of the Santa Fe Trail, because all those merchants on the trail were headquartered in Boston and New York and Philadelphia. Those big merchant houses were sending representatives out here. So there's no place without a connection. And when you look at that slash across the land there, that trail, there are trails, spider webbing all around. That's not just like one road and out. It's like I-70. How do we get to I-70? We've got roads leading us to I-70 and far beyond. Excuse me. So that's part of my mission as chair of the 200th, is to show everybody how they're connected to the trail. Mike has done such a wonderful job talking about Sheridan, and I wanted to kind of piggyback on what Mike has told you about Sheridan and try to show you how Sheridan is part of the Santa Fe Trail. And I have to give a nod to Frank Norris. A couple of years ago when we had our conference in Las Vegas, New Mexico, Frank Norris, who was supposed to speak this weekend, he and Mike Olson, but they were concerned with COVID. They hadn't been vaccinated yet, and coming from Santa Fe and Colorado Springs, they were really concerned. So they will be here in the fall for our September event, and I hope you will come back, because I guarantee you I will not do justice to the presentation that Frank did, but it was so excellent and the information was so good that I felt like you needed to have it in the spring. and not wait till the fall to get the gist of it, but do come back and hear Frank give this. So these maps that I'm going to share with you, here we've got basically the Smoky Hill Trail. That's essentially the Smoky Hill Trail and all the routes along it. And again, I'm sorry, I will try to not swing my arm so much. I know, it takes a village. So obviously the Santa Fe Trail is, going down through here. So what would this have to do with it? Well, I'm about to show you. So this is from the National Park Service. These maps are fantastic. So this is on the National Park Service website on the Santa Fe Trail. And I think Chris can explain it better. I get brain fog when I start talking about the government and the bureaucracy. But the Santa Fe Trail is one of several trails that is it's not like, it's a national, what is it, Chris? What do you call it?
Well, it was many purposeful trail.
So they administer the interpretation of several different trails. They're bundled, and the Santa Fe Trail is one of those. So it's not like the National Park Service has jurisdiction over that entire trail by any means, but the offices in Santa Fe, among other trails, interpret the Santa Fe Trail. And the Santa Fe Trail Association has a cooperative agreement to help interpret with the National Park Service. Does that sound okay? All right, good. So, all of this area, this would be, all right, let me get my notes. Lynn Kirkham said, I've never seen you speak from notes before. Well, you're going to know why after this, because I'm terrible at it. I can't keep them together, and so I have to either make it up as I go along or really know what I'm talking about. But, all right, this first 1821 map, William Becknell and 5 associates, as Chris pointed out, we don't know how many it was. It might have been 5, it might have been a dozen, who knows. And in Wagon Tracks, there is a terrific article by Craig Creason, one of those, about those men that might have accompanied Becknell. They headed west in September of 1821 from the Franklin area, successfully traveled to Santa Fe and arrived there on November 16th, sold their goods for a substantial profit. Their route to Santa Fe, which surmounted the Raton Mountains, was the forerunner for what became known as the Mountain Route. The trail linked from Franklin to Santa Fe via the Mountain Route, which is pictured right here, 934 miles. When people talk about, one of the things I've had so many reporters asking me about in doing articles or some kind of promotion on the Santa Fe Trail, how long was it? Well, just pick a number, just pick a number, and that's how long it was. Because the routes vary so much, the mileage varies so much, and when they talk about how much mileage we have in Kansas, that's because we have so much of 2 routes. And so that's why the mileage is so high in Kansas. Excuse me. So I hope y'all, can you see those maps well enough to, because the maps are fantastic, and you can go to the website after you get back home and take a look at them again. And did Frank create these?
The National Park Service, yes.
And Frank was part of that committee, because they're fantastic. Okay, so then the trail changes a little bit. Did I go? Like Mike, I'm just not up on modern technology. Okay, when Becknell headed east from Santa Fe on his first trading trip, he arrived back in Franklin in mid-January of 1822. This time, he avoided the Raton Mountains. I wonder why. Oh, wow. I was going to tell y'all before I got started that am medicated. I have new medications, and I was going to tell you if I got up here and did anything really embarrassing, we'd have to charge more for that. But all righty. So I'll just keep talking and let Chance work on it over there. So when he headed back, he didn't go by the mountain route, and smart man that he took a shorter, more direct route, which soon became known as the Cimarron route. Most of those who made the trek in later years followed in Becknell's footsteps. During this period, a few westbound parties started from Lexington, but most departed from Franklin, from Franklin, Missouri. Independence, Missouri, founded in March of 1827, had a minimal role as a trail town during this period. So the trail length from Franklin to Santa Fe via the Cimarron route was 890 miles. So he knocked off of 40, 50 miles there. Independence, Missouri, if you get the chance to go visit, has a phenomenal trails museum. Independence, Missouri is just one of my favorite places. You've got so much cool history there, so many eras represented, you know, from Harry Truman. There's just so much stuff. But the Trail Center is just fabulous. Has it reopened yet? Do you know? No. It has not. And does anybody know when it might reopen? No. God bless. That is such a fantastic place. Just so fantastic. So I hope that they can figure things out and get it reopened, because it's a wonderful, wonderful place. But if you get back to Missouri, a couple of things that I'm going to talk about. How many of you have visited, it was mentioned, Chris mentioned the Steamboat Arabia. How many of you have been to that museum? Phenomenal, phenomenal. I know the folks who, you know, dug that up and have worked with them on projects over the years. That is a world treasure, just plain and simply a world treasure. It's like walking into Walmart in 1856. There's just nothing else like it, just everything. Everything you need, you know, from pens to dishes to hats to cloth to chains to a house to canned food, everything you need to axes, everything you need to live is there. Everything. It's just absolutely incredible. So if you go visit western Missouri, and you can get a cluster of sites in a day or two, it'd make a great weekend trip to hit a bunch of those, because they're really wonderful. Okay, so 1822 to 28, this is pretty much the way we're going. All right, 1829 to 1830. Extensive Missouri River flooding in 1826, and particularly in 1828, destroyed Franklin as the primary Santa Fe Trail jumping off spot. And the advent of steamship traffic encouraged upriver development. So this is the story with the trail throughout. You know, technology and travel is changing the route of the trail. So in this case, it's the steamboats. Later on, it's going to be the trains. But the technology is changing the route of the trail. During this transition period, westbound trading caravans began from a variety of locations, including New Franklin, you know, they just moved it on up the river, Fayette, Lexington, Independence, and elsewhere. The trail length from Lexington to Santa Fe was 837 miles. So they're, you know, lopping off a little bit, starting a little further west, a little farther west. Okay, 1831 to 1845. See how it starts getting a little more complicated here? Independence grew into a substantial town by 1831. Given an improved connection between the town and two Missouri River landings, Independence captured most of the Santa Fe Trail traffic during this period. Rival Westport was founded in 1832, and of course, Westport will become Kansas City. Nearby Westport Landing was attracting a small but increasing portion of the New Mexico trade. Trail length from Independence to Santa Fe, 800 miles, so we've lopped off a little more. Now, what's really important to point out here, you've got all that traffic. A lot of that is coming up the Missouri River. So where's it coming from? It's coming from St. Louis. So we had our conference for the Santa Fe Trail Association in St. Louis a couple of years ago. It was fabulous, and we're staying right there in the hotel, and you're looking at the courthouse where the Bent's dad was a judge. You know, the Bent history, the Bent family history in St. Louis is just incredible, and again, the layers and layers of history in St. Louis. But St. Louis is this very important port on the Mississippi and on the Missouri. You've got goods coming up from New Orleans, and you've got goods coming across from the eastern cities, the Ohio River. You've got all these important trade routes coming into Missouri. Just like today, if you look at a map, and St. Louis has all those major interstates coming into it. You know, it's just like the hub of a wheel with those roads going out in every direction. It was the same thing then, except the river traffic was far more important at that time. So St. Louis, goods coming from Boston, New York, Philadelphia, and those eastern cities, a lot of which had been imported from Europe. When I was in Philadelphia last year, I was doing some research, and I found an article about a merchant in Philadelphia. And it was a really wonderful academic article. And this merchant was buying wool blankets out of England. So I can't remember if it was Yorkshire, where it was, but they're buying all these wool blankets. And so this, the writer is just blown away by how big the traffic in wool blankets is in Philadelphia. And they're talking about this wool blanket trade started in the 1820s and goes on through the 1860s, and then it just falls off. And bless his heart, he didn't make the connection that those wool blankets are probably headed to St. Louis and on down the Santa Fe Trail. And I bet you when I get the chance to research that, that's one of the merchants that I'm going to be researching when I get to put the other piece to that story, that that's where that was going. So these merchants in those eastern cities are profiting. You know, once Becknell goes and makes some money, once Mexico wins its independence from Spain and is open, everybody has been eyeing that market. In fact, there are articles in newspapers across Europe and the United States in the teens and 1820. You know, Mexico really needs to get its independence. That'll be best for everybody. And of course, you've got some of the religious thing going on. Spain, Mexico, Catholic. You've got England, and especially England being Protestant. You've got they're describing how oppressive this Catholic and governmental bureaucracy is in Spain, and how oppressive it is of Mexico, and how they are taking advantage of the poor parish priests all over Mexico who are sending all the tithes that they collect back to enrich the church in Spain. So it's a little or a lot self-serving, but it is really interesting in how the whole world is waiting for Mexico to get its independence so that they can trade with Mexico and then exploit all the stuff they have. So that's the grand plan, as it usually is. It's bad when they take advantage of you. It's not as bad when I take advantage of you. All right. What did I do with my little thing, Majig? There we go. Okay. So, 1831 to 1845. I think I've already talked about that. Independence grew into a substantial town, blah, blah, blah. Okay. And the trail route was 800 miles. Did I do that one twice? I can't count. All right, so the next one, 1846 to 1847. Okay, this was a volatile time in America and Mexico, and, you know, all our peaceful trading with Mexico is going down the tubes now because we declared war. U.S. Congress declared war against Mexico in May of 46. A month later, General Stephen Kearny's Army of the West left Fort Leavenworth, and by the end of August, his forces had gained control of New Mexico. And one of the most often told stories and most illustrated is, of course, Stephen Watts Kearny announcing to the folks in Las Vegas that they are no longer ruled by the Mexicans, that they are occupied now by the United States, and everybody's kind of like, I don't know, did they understand him when he got up there and said that? Because they all went like, whatever. And so I don't even know if they understood what he was saying. But anyway, he got up and made his big speech. So the Mexican War obviously changes the relationship in many, many ways. It's not just that you put up, you run a new flag up the pole. This is going to change how we trade. It's going to change the nature of so many things along the trail. By the end of August, his forces had gained control of New Mexico. But Indian raids made the Cimarron route increasingly dangerous. So ironically, most of the trail traffic was diverted to the mountain route. So, can you see the Raton Pass? So, we've forgotten the Cimarron cutoff here, and we're going to go through the mountains. And at that point, the length of the trail from Independence to Santa Fe was 844 miles. So we're tacking those miles back on as we go through the mountains. 1848 to 1860. With the signing of the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, New Mexico and surrounding territory was now part of the U.S. Southwest. Military traffic joined the commercial traffic along the Santa Fe Trail, and that's one of the biggest changes along the trail. The Cimarron route was again the most commonly used route to and from Santa Fe, but the town of Kansas, later Kansas City, had supplanted Independence as the predominant eastern trailhead. The trail linked from the town of Kansas to Santa Fe via the Cimarron route 788 miles. So now we're down below 800 miles going from Kansas City to Santa Fe. But I think sometimes that these numbers are deceptive because you're still bringing goods. If you're bringing them from St. Louis, you're still bringing them, you just didn't stop at Franklin, you didn't stop at Independence, you had to go on to Kansas City. So if you are on that leg of the journey, it doesn't shorten your journey at all. If you're picking up stuff in Kansas City and taking it on, it would shorten your journey. But if you're one of the ones making the long haul, it would not. Okay, 61 to 64. And of course, we have interesting times again in the country. With the coming of the Civil War, the activities of border ruffians east of Council Grove, some of my favorite people in history, made the trail in eastern Kansas unsafe to travel. So most westbound traffic commenced from Fort Leavenworth. Okay, we mentioned the movie Santa Fe Trail, which is my favorite movie ever, the movie that changed my life, starring Errol Flynn as Jeb Stewart from my hometown of Ararat, Virginia. I went to high school in Stewart, Virginia. So far, still named for Jeb Stewart. But I haven't checked this morning, so who knows. They did take his picture out of the courthouse. I expect it to be struck by lightning any time. So Jeb Stewart, one of the things that made me fall in love with Kansas history is the story of Jeb Stewart. And Jeb Stewart, who became famous as a Confederate cavalry commander under Robert E. Lee, spent most of his adult life in the Kansas Territory in the U.S. Army, and was stationed at Leavenworth and Riley, was all over this place, and was up and down the Santa Fe Trail quite often. So the movie Santa Fe Trail, which is not the most historically accurate, there might be 2 minutes in it that are historically accurate, But it's a wonderful movie. You know, Custer and Stewart are often compared, but they were not contemporaries in the Kansas Territory by any stretch. Stewart's a few years older than Custer, so their time at West Point did not coincide. A lot of those things, but the traffic on the trail and Stewart up and down the trail with Colonel Sumner is true. And it's some of my favorite stuff, and his encounters with John Brown on the Santa Fe Trail. If you visit the Blackjack Battlefield, which is south of Lawrence, near Baldwin City, Kansas, they have walking trails around the ruts, and I'll have to tell you, those ruts are my favorite ruts on the Santa Fe Trail because I just feel the spirits when I'm there. The ruts it's deep, and it's knowing the history, you know, the Battle of Blackjack with John Brown and Henry Clay Pate and the military people who would have been passing through there. That's my favorite piece of the trail, I have to say, is right there at Blackjack and those ruts. And they have developed new walking trails around the ruts there, and part of it is even ADA compliant. So it's really a wonderful way to experience the trail for folks that are in the eastern part of Kansas, or if you're taking a vacation out that way. You know, by all means, put that on your itinerary because it's just amazing. So the Civil War begins, of course, in Kansas several years before it moves to the rest of the country. And the Kansas-Missouri border is one of the scariest places on earth at that point. You're not safe no matter what side you're on. And if somebody rides up to your house and asks what side you're on, you really don't know what to say to people. One of the people that was part of that terrorism at the time was the really, really handsome, I wish we had a picture of him, Bill Anderson. And we've only got two pictures. One he's alive and one he's dead. You know, same outfit, different day. And Bill Anderson is born in Missouri, but he actually grows up not too far from Council Grove on the Santa Fe Trail, what they called Agnes City at the time. So Bill Anderson knew the Santa Fe Trail there along the border intimately, and he's one of the people that made it an unsafe place to travel. So yeah, the Santa Fe Trail is cutting through the heart of, you know, Kansas City, the middle, you know, the epicenter of the border conflict. So it makes sense that it would not be a safe place. So most westbound traffic commenced from Fort Leavenworth. Due to dangers from Indian raids, people traveled over the mountain route. The trail length from Fort Leavenworth to Santa Fe is 834 miles. 49 miles on the Fort Leavenworth Military Road, and 785 miles on the main trail. So that makes Fort Leavenworth a part of the trail physically. Now, Fort Leavenworth has always been a part of the trail, I would submit to you, because the people protecting the trail early on, just like Sumner and Stewart in those days, are coming out of Fort Leavenworth. So Fort Leavenworth has always had, from its founding in 1827, has always had a role to play in the Santa Fe Trail. Okay. 65 to 66. Now, after the Civil War, as we all know, the railroads boom. You know, this is the time we're tired of the war, it's over, and now that push for the Transcontinental Railroad is going to be in full force. So traffic over the trail resumed its pre-war pattern. The trail began or ended in Kansas City. Most traffic used the Cimarron route. The trail length again from Kansas City to Santa Fe on the Cimarron route, 788 miles. Now, we're getting to the really cool stuff. The Union Pacific Eastern Division, the UPED, or UPT, railroad construction began west from the Kansas City area in 1863. When the rails reached Junction City in June of 66, again after the war because nothing's going on during the war, westbound Santa Fe Trail travelers took the train to Junction City, then headed west along the Butterfield Overland Dispatch. Where's Jerry? Thank you, Jerry. The Butterfield Overland Dispatch route to Fort Ellsworth, then southwest on a connecting road to Fort Zara, where they resumed the main trail. Long-distance Santa Fe Trail traffic east of Fort Zara slowed to a trickle because you're going to get there as fast as you can. So the train, and that diagonal jog there. Trail length from Junction City to Santa Fe is still only 699 miles. So we keep, chopping it off there. It was 76 miles from Junction City to Fort Ellsworth, 40 miles from Fort Ellsworth to Fort Zara, 583 miles from Zara to Santa Fe. Aren't these maps awesome? Do y'all love these as much as I do? I think they're incredible. All right, we're getting close. The UPED reached Fort Harker near Fort Ellsworth, and of course Fort Harker is near and dear to our hearts, in June of 67. For the next several months, most Santa Fe bound travelers began their trail trips at this point. So how are they getting there? Stages, mostly stages. So the stage traffic, and I wish we could do a whole, like Mike said, there's so many areas to research, but the amount of stage traffic is tremendous. And you've got all these little stage routes that are feeding into, whatever the terminus was or wherever the beginning was. You've got all these stage lines going in all different directions and stages, sometimes multiple stages a day. So this is, at this point, the train is not supplanting the stage traffic. It would be almost a boon. Would that be accurate to say, Mike? Thank you for agreeing with me. They don't always. I've had talks where they didn't agree with me. All righty. So we're getting even closer now. So October of 67 to June of 68. The Union Pacific tracks reached the town of Sheridan. Wait a minute. I'm getting ahead of myself. I can't wait to get to Sheridan. All right. The UP reached Hays City, near Fort Hays, in October of 67, after which wagons and stagecoaches used this point to begin their westward trips. Most long-distance trail traffic stopped east of Fort Dodge. Trail length from Hays to Santa Fe, 568 miles. 75 miles was the feeder route from Fort Hays to Fort Dodge, 493 miles from Fort Dodge to Santa Fe on the main route of the Santa Fe Trail. So see how these places get left behind? Fort Zara is nothing now, and Mike really pointed that out, this, how it's just rolling westward and fortunes are made and lost like that, as the railroad moves westward and everything follows it. Okay, are y'all ready? Da 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 da. Okay, I got to have a drink for this one. The UP tracks reached the town of Sheridan, soon renamed Sheridan. And if I have one criticism of Mike's talk, is he lingered on that picture of Sheridan far too long. And that would be the only criticism I have, Mike. I can't stand that little man. Okay, so they reached the town of Sheridan in June of 1868. And then westbound freight headed southwest over a wagon road to the new, and if you know the story about Fort Lyon and everything, to the new Fort Lyon on the main trail. The Cimarron route was abandoned after June of 68 because it just really has no function after that. And most long-distance mountain route traffic ceased east of Fort Lyon. The trail linked from Sheridan to Santa Fe, 428 miles. 120 miles was the feeder route from Sheridan to Fort Lyon, and 308 miles was on the main route from Fort Lyon to Santa Fe. And I've got a little something, if I can find it here, that I wanted to read to you. Like I said, this is why I don't speak from notes. So Mike mentioned Monument and Coyote and some of those places that were stops along the trail. So this was June or July of 68 that this appeared in the newspaper. So it's talking about the removal of things from Monument. Everything has been moved to Monument, and in a few days, it had been moved to Monument, I think, from Coyote. Everything has been moved to Monument, and in a few days, nothing of Monument will remain. As the new town of Sheridan, 20 miles west of here, in a couple of weeks will do all the business on the road west of Hays City. Half of the buildings in Monument having been removed to Sheridan already. Monument derives its name from a station bearing the same name on the old Butterfield Overland Dispatch stage route, 30 miles southeast of here. Construction trains are now running 12 miles west of here and within 8 miles of Sheridan. When the road is completed to the latter, it is said that work will be suspended until Congress grants an additional subsidy. Mike told you about that in his talk. At some point between here and the mountains, a large town is destined to spring up, but at what point is beyond the calculation of railroad profits. Nearly all are of the opinion that Fort Wallace or Pond Creek, and we have the mayor of Pond Creek, Mark Smith, right back here, about 35 miles west of here is to be the main town. But wherever the road branches off to Santa Fe, it is safe to say that a large and important point will spring up. Cheyenne Wells, 40 miles beyond Pond Creek, many are of the opinion, will be the metropolis of the great American desert. I love those things when, they don't know. They don't know, which one's going to take. They don't know. It could have well been Sheridan. Sheridan's a substantial place there for a while, and it's there longer than most of these other towns. So it really had a good chance of remaining. And just like us, they didn't know what the future held. So we want to linger on this for a little bit. There's Sheridan right there, and then Fort Lyon. How many of you have been out to visit like New Fort Lyon, Old Fort Lyon, Bent's New Fort, Old Fort, all that good stuff? It's again, such a tremendous amount of history in that area, and just so many layers of it, touching on so many personalities and so many layers of history. It's just an incredible area. Okay, so from March of 70 to July of 73, the Kansas Pacific, formerly known as the artist named Prince, reached Kit Carson, Colorado in March of 1870. The primary connecting route between there and the main Santa Fe was a 66-mile freight route that went southwest to the site of Bent's Old Fort. The trail length from Kit Carson to Santa Fe was 358 miles via the freight route. 66 miles was the feeder route from Kit Carson to the Old Fort site. 292 miles on the main route from the fort site to Santa Fe. So see how it keeps evolving there? I'll let y'all look at that for just a minute. Now, up until this point, we've just been talking about the UP or the KP. Well, that's about to change. From July of 73 to October of 73, The Kansas Pacific, in a bid to stay competitive with the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe, completed a 58-mile spur line in October 73 from Kit Carson to Los Animas, located adjacent to the Santa Fe Trail. For the next 2 years, significant trail traffic continued to move over 2 separate routes. The trail length from Los Animas to Santa Fe was 304 miles. So, all along, the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe has been creeping up on them right here. How many of you are familiar with Cyrus K. Holliday, the founder of the Atchison, Topeka, Santa Fe? One of my favorite people in history. I love Cyrus Holliday. And when I lived in Topeka, for a time I was the historian at the cemetery, at the historic Topeka Cemetery, where he, along with a lot of other famous people, are buried. And his was one of my favorite graves. The marker is no bigger than the top of this podium. It's one of the simplest markers, and it just says Cyrus Holliday and the dates of his birth and death. And so people would call me, and they're like, we're looking for Holliday's marker, where is it? And they're looking at all the big markers, or the mausolea, and he's got one of the plainest markers in the cemetery. Arguably, there's nobody in the cemetery that did more in westward expansion and in the founding of Topeka and in the making Kansas a free state. And there's just so many roles that he played. And if you go to Topeka, and I would encourage you to go to Topeka, by God, you're paying for it. You should go see what it looks like. Visit the State House, which is a crown. It's just magnificent. But there are all these monuments along Kansas Avenue, and then around. Carson Norton's the sculptor for one of the monuments, Dr. Crumbine, which is just phenomenal. But the statue of Cyrus Holliday, I was an advisor on this committee to put up these monuments. And all the pictures we see of Cyrus Holliday are this old man with white hair. And I'm like, we don't want the old man. We want that young, energetic, forward-thinking, that entrepreneur that came to Topeka and made something of that place. And so I was so thrilled with the sculpture of him they came up with. He's in motion. He's looking up at a clock there, and he's checking it against his watch, just like he's checking the railroad schedules. And his coattails are flying behind him, and he's in mid-stride, and it's just the most wonderful depiction, because that's what he was. He was just making things happen, and so positive, and such a good man. I just love him to death. And he was just unstoppable. He was just so smart, and maybe some of the things that they did, if you read the history of the Santa Fe Railroad, would not be entirely legal today, but I think it was just thinking outside the box. And one of the things, when Holliday was trying to get the charter for the railroad, and he's going back east and trying to raise money, they need a railroad to bring wood from the area around Atchison to Topeka. We've got all this building in Topeka, and we don't have any trees. So they're trying to get wood to Topeka. So he needs a railroad. Nobody back east cares if Topeka needs wood. So what does he do? He tacks the name Santa Fe onto we're going to build a train that goes all the way to Santa Fe. Well, now people get excited. He had no idea if they'd ever get to Santa Fe. But it worked. He raised money that way. So all the time, the Kansas Pacific is trying to figure out what to do. The ATSF is getting closer and closer. Those railroad stories are just incredible. So you see you've got that double route going there. Okay. So October of 73 to September of 75. The Kansas Pacific, in a bid to stay competitive, did I tell y'all that? I did. Okay. In September of 75, the ATSF tracks reached Los Animas, and for the next several months, both railroads had railheads in the same town. Virtually all Santa Fe Trail traffic now went over the main route via Raton Pass, and the Grenada-Fort Union Wagon Road, as far as the Santa Fe Trail traffic is concerned, was abandoned. The trail length from Los Animas to Santa Fe, 304 miles. To December 75. The Kansas Pacific Track crews, building westward from Los Animas, reached the boomtown of La Junta in mid-December of 75. And within 2 weeks, AT and SF tracks reached there as well. For the next several months, both railroads were in an equally competitive position to serve points in southeastern Colorado. The trail length from La Junta to Santa Fe, 285 miles. And there we've got, again, all the Santa Fe and the UP are just right here, nose to nose, trying to get to Santa Fe. 76 to 78. Santa Fe Railroad track crews building westward from La Junta reached Pueblo in March of 76. Just 1 month later, the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad completed a line south from Pueblo to El Morro. As a result, mail traffic and some stage passengers began their Santa Fe Trail journey south of El Morro, which is not too far from Trinidad. But Santa Fe-bound freight traffic continued to run southwest from La Junta. Again, the trail length from El Morro to Santa Fe is only 207 miles. So we're getting closer. April 76, 78. Santa Fe tracks reached Trinidad in September of 78. Construction of this line had begun at La Junta in May. Following a February confrontation south of Trinidad that resulted in ATSF crews gaining the right to build over Raton Pass. The Santa Fe's victory at Raton Pass eliminated the Kansas Pacific as a railroad competitor, and the Kansas Pacific route between Kit Carson, Los Animas, and La Junta was abandoned soon afterward. Bless their hearts. The trail length from Trinidad to Santa Fe, 202 miles. Santa Fe tracks reached the top of Raton Pass and entered New Mexico on November 30th, 1878. And in February of 79, crews extended the tracks to Otero. This impromptu camp near the old Clifton House stage station, just south of present-day Raton, served as the temporary railhead while construction crews pushed toward Las Vegas. The trail length from Otero to Santa Fe, 176 miles. So we ain't even talking about the KP anymore. They're just out of the picture. Santa Fe Railroad tracks reached Las Vegas, New Mexico on July 1st, 1879, and the first train entered the city 3 days later. Las Vegas served as the railhead and Eastern Trail terminus for the last few months that the Santa Fe Trail served as a long-distance route. The trail length from Las Vegas to Santa Fe, 64 miles. So we're nearly there. The first Santa Fe Railroad train entered Santa Fe, New Mexico on February 9th, 1880 via an 18-mile spur track that Santa Fe County voters had funded in an October 1879 bond election. The entire 1835-mile mountain route of the Santa Fe Trail from Kansas City to Lamy and on to Santa Fe could now be traversed by rail. After this date, the Santa Fe Trail either served local needs or fell into disuse. Isn't that an incredible story? Like I said, I highly advise you to look at the website for the National Park Service Santa Fe Trail and look at those maps and study them because they're just amazing. And in September, when Frank Norris can join us, I would ask you to come and hear him as well. So there's just a couple of other things that I wanted to mention. This gives the timeline. This is a great little chart. The length of the trail and Dr. Jake gave me a great Christmas present. I'm going to be a passenger on the Sweat Airlines, compliments of the Sweat Ranch, and fly over that route from Sheridan to Lyon on a date that we could figure out where it might show up, maybe when the grass comes out in the spring or something, and look at that route, because I think that's pretty cool. So that's just another one. All right. Thank you, National Park Service. Okay, how am I doing on time? Have I got 5 minutes or something? Okay. One of the things that I wanted to point out, we've talked so much, like Mike did, and we're going to talk some more about the characters that are along the trail at Sheridan. And because Sheridan was gone in a wisp of smoke, we forget that it was a real place. It was a real place. This ad for one of those hotels was in the Santa Fe Weekly Post. And I thought that ad for the hotel in Sheridan was just a great example of, these are real businesses doing real stuff and advertising. People are coming to Sheridan. They're not just camping out there. People are coming there to trade. It is a really important hub on this whole trade with Santa Fe. So I just love that. And then some of the merchants, of course, Otero and Seller that Mike talked about, which were so important, just huge merchants. And I just wanted to read a few names of some of these guys that were trading in anything and everything. So Mr. Ruggles, C.W.N. Ruggles, was the dealer in anything and ran a general store, but he was also the postmaster. He processed 2,800 letters a week. 2,800 letters a week going through Sheridan. Seward and Company were grocery and produce. Johnson and Bradford, general produce. Mark Bedell was general merchandise, and he spoke several languages. J.H. Dagner had a liquor store. B. Frank had clothing and hides. D. Cone had clothing. Kruger, jewelry, newspapers, and books. People were buying books in Sheridan. Riley and Ride had a bakery. Dr. Clutter was a surgeon. And in his office, you had Dr. Dubois, a dentist, and Dr. Speck, who was Justice of the Peace for a while. Sam Jordan was a barber and also a news dealer. Mr. Steele had a laundry. Thurman and Webb, grocers and produce. The Perry House Hotel, the American House Hotel. Mrs. Prouty's, which was a restaurant and boarding house. Goodale, who had a saloon. Norton, who had a saloon. Benson, who had a saloon. J.E. Hughes, who had a saloon. Thomas Mattinger, who had a saloon. Otero and Seller, who had 3 warehouses. Webster Music and Company, who had warehouses and were large contractors in the Mexican trade. And they had the contract for grading the road west of Sheridan as well. Chicken Company, who had a warehouse. You've got, I think Mike may have touched on this, but I was going to mention it again. Otero and Seller, 3 of their buildings, you had a store that was 30 by 100, a wool house that was 30 by 75 feet. So you had the trade in wool going back and forth. It's just incredible. And I think it was Marie Bullard who talked about tons of wool being warehoused in Sheridan that was headed east to be processed. Webster Music and Company had an overland transit company, a general grocery, and a forwarding business. So a lot of these businesses are collecting a commission basically to move freight, to warehouse, and then keep moving freight on down the line. Chicken company, grocers, liquor store, 3 warehouses, forwarding and commission company. Johnson and Bradford, hardware, stoves, furniture, Queensware, groceries, firearms, ammo. They must have done a booming business. B. Frank, a general store. Dagner, liquor store. And just on and on. Endress, he bought wool. He was a wool dealer from back east. There's so much more to research on Sheridan. And this one, I love this. This is from the Leavenworth Times in December of '69. Among the shipments yesterday at the Kansas Pacific Depot was one of 5,000 pounds of bacon from Joseph Durr of this city of Leavenworth to Webster Music and Company of Sheridan. 5,000 pounds of bacon being shipped to Sheridan. That's one shipment. One shipment. It boggles the mind, the business that was going on in Sheridan. And in November of '69, they were saying Sheridan has been established as a business point nearly 2 years and is the well-known shipping point for trade and the center of travel for New Mexico and Arizona. And of course, that was '69, and then we know that just months, weeks later, it was gone. Moved on to Kit Carson. And as one of the writers said, just weeks ago, Sheridan was and Kit Carson was not. And now Kit Carson is and Sheridan is not. And that was just the way it went as you went rolling across the prairie there. So thank y'all very much. I really appreciate everybody's attention.
One of the few redeeming qualities about that picture of Little Bill, the only thing I attribute to that is greatness. He gave in 1872 Custer and Grand Duke Alexis of Russia the greatest cussing out anybody ever had.
He's not without his redeeming qualities. Thank you.
And Deb, we have one more thing we'd like to do. And I'd like to call DK up one more time.
She's going to cry. Can you get it together?
No.
No? So you know what this is, and it's a little bit of a surprise, apparently.
Yes.
So coin number 6 for someone who is from Virginia and all points west. Inspired, informed, and preserved our nation's history, and with a Rolodex that's bigger than a 55-gallon drum to bring folks like me out here. So to join us as the Dennis K. Clark Lecture Series.
I would have done a better job if I'd known this.
You already earned it, Deb. It doesn't matter. So good job. Okay. Well, no, it's time for lunch, and lunch is ready. Quick word, JD. In fact, just say it from right there, just about our artifacts right here.
I want to mention and want to give a thank you to Jeb Stewart and his daughter from Lyon with the Museum of the Plains down there. They brought up some items that Clyde Blackburn had found over at Sheridan several years ago, and they've also got his book of Down the Treasure Trail. So go look over his items over here that he brought up, and they have this book for sale.
Okay. And then also, I believe, Jerry DeBaker, thank you to the Kesslers for bringing those things up from Leota very much. And then also, Jerry DeBaker, and he is responsible for our brand new player piano. He's out demonstrating. He completely redone all of the innards of that machine. Beautiful 1913. He can tell you more about it during the day. And then also thanks to Vernon and Deb Fisher, who went to Denver to get the actual piano. So Jerry's going to be playing that during the day. And then Jerry, at some point, I'd like for you to say a few words about the piano. Okay, all right, very good. All right, so let's break for lunch, and we'll try to get back on schedule here a little closer. Let's say, let's see if we can get back here at, is it 1:45?
I don't have my thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's 1:45 is the next, but we'll see. It will adjust as we go. Enjoy lunch.